Thank you very much, Sean. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We thank you for taking the time out on a Tuesday morning to listen to some interesting safety topics. Obviously, these are all brought out by you, the audience, on topics that you want to hear. And that's why this morning we are going to be talking about black mold. But first, we want to take a second and just thank IOPSA, the Institute for Plumbing SA, as well as FEM and SIOSH as well for the amazing work that they are actually doing. Remembering, SIOSH has accredited these toolbox talks with 1 CPD point. So please, if you are a SIOSH member, don't forget to log in and claim that 1 CPD point for yourself. But what if you are a plumber and you have been asking, when are we going to get our CPD points from PIRB? Well, the good news is you can already start claiming 0.25 CPD points from PIRB for every single toolbox talk that you join, which means as a plumber, for the entire month, listening to 4 of the toolbox talks, you'll be able to claim 1 CPD point from PIRB. So this is really awesome from PRB to allow that, and we want to say thank you very much to them for giving us this opportunity to speak to you out there in the area. Now, we do want to mention, please, black mold this morning. Is it dangerous? What can you do? Many of us know what it is. When we talk about black mold or Stachybotrys chartarum, which is the technical term for the actual black mold, we are not talking about just the color of the mold. There are many different color or types of mold that are actually represented as black. You get your green, yellows, and across the spectrum almost. But this specific type called black mold is one that has been very controversial, especially if you look it up on the internet. Many sites say it's extremely dangerous. Some sites say, there's just too much hype. There's nothing wrong with it at all. So what is black mold? Is it really dangerous? And what can you do if you come across it? Well, we've done some extensive research after being requested to discuss this topic with all of you, especially those of you who are homeowners, who are living in homes that have slightly damp areas, especially in the kitchen and in the bathroom area. And then in particular, those of you who are plumbers out there in the industry that need to go and work in these environments. So what is the current understanding of black mold, and where can it actually be found? How do we protect ourselves from it? And what can you as the plumber do, or even as the individual who might face the situation, do to ensure that your health and safety is kept at a optimal condition? Well, for this information, we looked at a few websites. Obviously, we need to go to the professionals with this. We need to understand really what is black mold and how can it be dangerous. Well, black mold, which is found in a lot of homes or a lot of areas, uh, basically it can cause illness. However, the consensus across the board, especially with the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, states that it is not fatal. Now, the reason why they would say that is because there are not enough cases of people dying in order to determine whether a substance is fatal or not. It is not just one person dying from it, it's multiple people. So instead of just delving in to see what the actual specialists or professionals say about these things, I also delved in to see how they represent their statistics in order to claim whether something is fatal, non-fatal, or if it is hazardous or non-hazardous. So basically, what I've seen is they need to have a substantial amount of people talking about deaths due to mold, especially black mold, in order for it to be classified as black mold, being toxic. Now, that was very interesting because that means a few people have already died due to high exposure levels to this type of mold. However, it is not high enough to be classified as fatal. Now, that to me is a very sad fact, because in health and safety, we say that even one person is too many. So what does this mean? Being not fatal, but can cause illness. Does this mean you should keep black mold as a pet? Well, here is what we have found out from our research. Every single person has a different level of tolerance to allergens like black mold spores. So basically, black mold is an allergen. In other words, it can contact the skin and you can break out in an allergy toward it. Now, every single person is different, and this is why the research on this is so difficult, because each person that is exposed to different levels has a different reaction. Now, those with asthma, respiratory allergies, or immune suppression will feel the effects of black mold, especially these microtoxins that they let loose throughout the home, more than most people. And that is because the immune system is already designed to have a weakness for certain allergens. So, as we mentioned, especially with respiratory problems, asthma or respiratory allergies, this can contact the skin. It can be inhaled through the mouth or nose, and this is where that allergy will then spike in the body. Now, whether you feel that you are experiencing black mold symptoms or not, the consensus on the web with professionals and with most people that we have spoken to is that it is best to get rid of black mold as soon as you find it. Now, let's just stop here and take a look back a few years ago. For those of you who might be able to remember when snow that you could buy from the shops came in a little box, artificial snow. And this artificial snow was made up almost 100% of asbestos. And this is what you used to recreate that feeling of Christmas vibes and things like that for you and your family. Now, thinking back in those days, if you lived in those days, well, these were sold on shop corners. Would you have bought them? Probably. Would you buy it now? Well, you say, obviously not. We realize that asbestos is a huge killer because of its carcinogen atmosphere that it creates. And no doubt we've seen the many deaths because of the prolonged exposure to asbestos. However, the technology of understanding the science behind the deaths of asbestos did not come into play until much later. In fact, when it was too late. Now, we can ask the same with black mold or any type of mold that we are finding in our homes, especially those that give off these microtoxins. Now, according to the CDC, black mold spores can generate a cold or flu-like symptom. And these would be stuffy nose, wheezing, skin and eye irritation. Longer exposure can cause more serious symptoms, such as fever, shortness of breath, and nausea. Now, you tell me that there's not a pattern here. Yes, our current understanding and the current scientific research into these molds is not substantial enough to tell everyone that this is a fatal or a poisonous or a toxic substance. However, we can start seeing the patterns for ourselves. So we ask you again, is it better just to get rid of it, or are you okay with leaving it in your homes? But this doesn't really answer our question on black mold. The question really is it dangerous? Well, let's take a look at the facts once again. Black mold can cause an array of allergic reactions as well as health problems. Again, each person can be exposed to different levels and have different reactions. But depending on the level of exposure, as well as the number of spores inhaled, some of these symptoms on serious levels can be chronic fatigue or headaches, fever, irritation to the eyes, mucous membranes of the mouth, nose, and throat, sneezing, rashes, and chronic coughing. In fact, if we go one step further, the research has said on a small number of people that have been allegedly exposed to this type of black mold have had causes of exasperated allergic reaction because of their own bodies reacting to this type of spore. And these extreme symptoms were nausea, vomiting, and bleeding in the lungs. So we ask you again, are we seeing a pattern here with current understanding, understanding a few years ago, and where will be in the future understanding of this type of hazardous spore that we are finding? So how can you protect yourself? And in particular, we want to speak to those of you who are plumbers. And the reason why we want to speak to you specifically is because just recently we had a plumber who was exposed to black mold, and he was actually hospitalized. So please, we want to encourage you to be careful. We do not know exactly what type of allergic reaction you will have to that spore and these microtoxins that are given off by the black mold. So why not be safe rather than be sorry? Now, black mold is likely to appear in areas that are particularly warm, humid, and damp, especially basements or crawl spaces that have leaks. Now, you as plumbers are being called out to fix these leaks all the time. You are constantly crawling in spaces that nobody else wants to go into. You are finding yourself in the depths of areas that most people refuse to go in, and that's why they call the professionals out, which means you are more likely to be exposed to this type of mold. Now, black mold is readily identifiable by its color, but most other molds will be green, gray, but toxic black mold is very dark black. However, there are other types of mold that do look black, but we are looking one that is extremely black. However, when you are in these crawl spaces and basements, there is not sufficient lighting in order to determine what type of mold you are looking at. Again, rather be safe than sorry. Now, are we saying that you need to dress up like the plumbers in this picture? Full suits, hazmat, masks, rubber gloves, even tied off as if you were going into Chernobyl? Well, not at all. What we want to do is recognize, first of all, that it is dangerous. It may not be lethal as science currently understands it, but we have seen the patterns of exposure levels. We also do not know what our current allergic reaction may be to these spores. So what is the verdict? What are we trying to get at in this toolbox talk for those of you plumbers out there who may be exposed temporarily or long term to these types of molds? Well, it is best avoided. If you are exposed, it may not be deadly, but we want to ensure that the reputation of this black mold is imprinted in our mind. And that is because we do not know what our allergic reaction may be. We might have immune suppression. We might have first stage asthma or other respiratory problems that we might not know of. Perhaps it is more advanced and you know that you have this. Well, in that case, be especially careful. Now, while it is likely that you will not die from black mold poisoning, according to our current understanding, because it is just not that toxic, you should try and remove it as quickly as possible. Because if you have black mold or exposed to black mold, it is treatable, it is removable, and it is preventable. Now, what we want to allow you to please take away from this toolbox talk today is that it never hurts to clean regularly. And we can use a bleach mixture with some nice warm or cool water. Remember, when working with bleach or anything like that, we want to ensure that we are still protected, because any splashback or inhalation of this type of chemical can also create other issues for ourselves. So when working or cleaning or even going into an area where there is a possibility that you might find black mold or any other type of mold that gives off these microtoxins, please protect yourself. Use the correct PPE. So make sure you've got rubber gloves on so that while cleaning or working with your plumbing in that area, you're not exposed to that mold on your body. Wear safety goggles so that it doesn't contact your eyes. Now, the respirator that it's talking about here, and we looked up the specific one from 3M. This is an N95 or an N100 respirator. And I have a photo of this on the next slide that I'd like to show you, just so that you can understand this is the one you need to buy when you are going into these areas. And if you are not in these areas for a long time, well, then you do not have to wear the respirator for a very long time. But just remember, would you rather be safe or a potential statistic for future reference when we say, well, we didn't realize how bad it actually was? And then outer clothing. When we talk about outer clothing, we are talking about clothing that covers your extremities. So right up to the hands and right up to the ankles is what we actually want to cover. And this is again because we are not too sure of the allergic reaction you may have to this type of mold. So if it does land on the skin, there is a possibility for the absorption to go inside and cause a reaction onto your body. Now, this information on black mold, we want to give this to you. I've got a web address here from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And what I'd like to do is maybe just at the end of this, I'm going to see if we can't just copy and paste it for you. For those of you who want more information, you can just drop us an email or send us a WhatsApp message, and I can send you this information. But all you need to do is log on to the CDC and search for black mold, and it will bring up all the information for you as well. So just to remind you that rubber gloves we can find pretty much all the time. You should have this in your PPE toolbox already. Safety goggles, many of you are already wearing this. You already have your outer clothing and these garments that you're wearing for work. We just want to encourage you to please cover the arms, especially in these areas. And then the respirator that you are looking for looks just like the one in the picture on your screen at the moment. So it looks very much like a dust mask that you will find at most hardware stores. But what you are looking for is the N95 type, and you can get this from 3M as well. Now, if you have a respirator or a mask that you are currently using, why not go and look at it to check, is it an N95 or even an N100 type of mask? And they say that this allows you to breathe in fresh air, take in that oxygen to continue working, but it stops the spores from these molds that or the exposure to these molds from entering your nose and mouth. And essentially what we want to stop is this entering into our body and causing a reaction maybe later on in life that science has not readily found yet. So again, rather be safe. When it comes to black mold, whether toxic or not, whether we do our research and we find that some say it's okay and others say it's deadly, what do we want to do? Protect ourselves from the risks and hazards at our workplace. This is a potential risk and hazard. So when working in damp areas that may have a leak, please look after your health. Remember, it's health and safety. We want to ensure our safety is priority, but that also means our health is a priority. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. These Toolbox Talks, once again, are accredited with 0.25 PRB CPD points for those plumbers out there, which means if you get 4 of them throughout the month, you can claim a whole CPD point for that month. And I hope that helps, especially from PRB. And then again, thank you to IOPSA, FEM, as well as everybody working behind the scenes, as well as you, Sean. And we just want to hand over back to you, reminding you for next week's Toolbox Talk on the 21st of January, which is hazardous environments. And here we are going to be looking at heights. So thank you again. We look forward to seeing you all next week. And please drop us your question, comments, or even criticism so that we can make these Toolbox Talks even better. Thank you very much, Sean.
It's 100%. I've got a question/statement here for you. It reads, you can send employees for baseline medicals to find out exposure and MSDS sheet.
Yes, 100%. So obviously, when you do send employees for medicals, this is going to be your normal construction medical. You do need to specifically speak to the doctor on what you want checked. So your basic checks are going to be your eyes, ears, respiratory is going to be checked, but not for the allergens. They're just going to see if they are smokers, what type of breathing or respiratory rate they actually have. And then you're obviously going to check ears, your eyesight, but you can request additional checks on your employees. So if you are exposed to certain toxic chemicals, substances, or even potential black mold, you can request these types of checks. Just remember, they are going to be added extra, which means there is going to be a cost, but it would be a good idea if you are exposed to high levels of these types of molds to ensure that your employees are kept safe throughout their working period. Thanks, Sean.
All right, perfect. And then that's all of the questions we have got for you. Just before I do end off the session, guys, I do have a question here that reads, explain how the process of claiming the CPD points for the PIRB will work. All right. So you do not need to worry about that, guys. After every single session, I submit a report to the PIRB, and then they put it in their workflow to actually allocate it to you. So it's nothing from your side. If you do ever want to follow up, you can just email them and follow up on your points. But as far as submitting the points for these sessions, we do it for you guys, so you don't have to worry about that. All right. Other than that, guys, thanks so much for joining us on this morning session. I am going to go ahead and end it off now. There will be a survey which pops up in your web browser. If you could just take the 30 seconds to go ahead and answer that for us, it will be appreciated. And other than that, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. I hope everybody has a fantastic one. Bye, guys.